Welcome back. Joining us now in our center seat, Green Party presidential nominee, Dr. Jill Stein. Thanks so much for being here.
Great to be with you, Brett.
You know, in recent polls, you've been hovering around 3–4%, depending on the poll. And some states, it's a little bit more than that. We asked people on Twitter to write in some questions for you here. John types in, how do you respond to critics who say that voting for you or Governor Gary Johnson, the Libertarian vote, is a wasted vote?
I'd say we live in a democracy, and big politicians don't own our votes. They have to earn them, and they have not earned them in an election where the two major party candidates have the highest ratings of dislike and distrust ever in our history. 75% of people, actually more than that, are now clamoring to open up the debates so they can find out about their other choices. And one last point to mention from the Quinnipiac poll that just came out yesterday, the vast majority of Donald Trump and Hillary Clinton supporters don't actually support them. Their main motive is that they don't like the other candidate. So let's give them some other choices.
The other good doctor on the panel here?
Yes, and we are alumni of the same school.
We are indeed.
As we've discovered. I reviewed your policy positions, and I think you're obviously closer to the Democratic Party, especially the core base, than to the Republicans. Do you worry about the Ralph Nader problem, 2000, that it could be a close election, could hinge on one state, and you could have enough support drawn away from Hillary Clinton to elect a Republican?
I will feel terrible if Donald Trump gets elected, and I will feel terrible if Hillary Clinton gets elected.
Equally so?
Yes, because, you know, Hillary Clinton wants to start an air war over Syria with a nuclear-armed power with 2,000 nuclear weapons on hair-trigger alert. Given Hillary's track record, not only in Iraq but in Libya, you know, I think this is about as dangerous as it gets. Donald Trump wants to bar Muslims from entering into this country, but Hillary Clinton has been very busy bombing Muslims in other countries. You know, I think we live in a democracy. At the end of the day, we have 4 choices, and the American people have yet to hear about their other 2 choices. They deserve not only to have a right to vote, but they have a right to know who they can vote for.
Shannon.
Dr. Stein, I cover legal issues and primarily the Supreme Court. There's an opening, as you know, on the court now. It would be one of the first orders of business for you as a president. What kind of judge, or would there even be a name that you would float for somebody who would be your ideal nominee?
At this point, I don't have a name, but, you know, I think we need people on the court who are not influenced by big business, by corporations. I think we need a person who is of, by, and for the people.
Would you have any kind of litmus test on any specific issues or things that you think are legal debates that are of key importance to you?
You know, I think it is important that we protect women's right to choose. I think it's important that we protect workers' rights and immigrant rights. I think the working people of America have been taking quite a beating, and they need support in our highest court as well.
George.
You've used the word democracy twice now. Let's use it a third time. On your website, you talk about democratizing the Federal Reserve System and having public control of the money supply. I presume you mean that Congress would set interest rates. If so, would there ever be a time Congress would vote to raise interest rates?
So let me just backtrack a little bit from them. There are some things on the website that are more aspirational and more long-term and not really the focus of our concrete policies right now. So I'd say in terms of the Fed, you know, our main interest right now is to make the Fed more transparent so that it's not a mystery to the American people what it's doing. I think it's also important that we break up the big banks. 8 years ago, you know, Lehman Brothers collapsed. Just this past week, we saw more corruption at Wells Fargo. I think, you know, we have banks that are still too big to fail, and the American people are very much at risk for what they're doing. So, you know, while that doesn't address the Fed in particular, I think the power of the big private banks right now is a real issue and puts our economy at risk.
Dr. Stein, there aren't too many candidates who have had warrants for their arrest. The Morton County Sheriff's Department says they issued an arrest warrant for you and your vice presidential nominee, charged with criminal trespass and criminal mischief, Class B misdemeanors, after this spray painting of the construction equipment on that pipeline. What about that? I mean, why do it? And it is against the law.
It is indeed. I think we're in a crisis situation, which I do not take lightly. You had here a pipeline company that had just bulldozed the grave sites of the Standing Rock Sioux people the day before, that had loosed the attack dogs on peaceful protesters, and which are putting at risk the water supply, not just for the Standing Rock Sioux, but for 17 million people downstream on the Missouri River, and also at a time when we cannot afford another major pipeline project. This is like the Keystone XL pipeline, which we stopped by public pressure. Right now, in spite of the president's directive that the pipeline companies stop on federal land and that they voluntarily stop in other areas, they are not. They are going full speed ahead in a way that puts us all very seriously at risk. The indigenous people, are putting themselves at grave risk. I did not go there intending to participate in civil disobedience, and when they asked me, I felt like here they are, perhaps among the most vulnerable people on the planet. They're standing up for us. I wanted to support them. Okay,
one more clarification before we turn to foreign policy in the next block. You tweeted out about the DNC leak. DNC leak shows Jay Johnson, Homeland Security Secretary, gave $561,310 to the DNC, then was made Director of Homeland Security. This looks bad. It looks like pay to play.
Well, pay to play is the name of the game these days. We can look at what's going on with the Clinton Foundation. I think, the American people are very uncomfortable with the blurring of the lines between public interest and private interest and the power of money in politics to exert that influence behind closed doors, whether you're looking at the power of the big banks, the power of the health insurance companies that have, had a hand in creating Obamacare, and the pharmaceutical companies. The American people are really being thrown under the bus by what they see as a rigged economy and a rigged political system that's delivered it to us. I think it's really important.
That sounds a little like Donald Trump.
Well, it may sound like him, but unfortunately he's as busy as anybody else paying his way to play. You may know that his foundation as well contributed somewhat $25,000 to an attorney general's campaign in Florida, at which time she did an about face and then decided not to prosecute him for his fraud with the Trump University. So it's on all sides of the aisle. I'm the only candidate in this race that is not taking money from lobbyists, from corporate interests, and I do not have a super PAC. So my campaign has the unique ability to stand up for what the American people actually need.